Welcome to Broken Secrets, a show in which we discuss ideas, concepts, techniques, philosophies, sciences, and indeed truths that are entirely ignored by mainstream information sources and certainly not taught in schools, but are nonetheless truths that better explain the reality in which we now find ourselves. Each episode of our journey will take us through important but often obscure books and ideas, which many of which were written by highly influential individuals most have never heard of. Many of the subjects to be discussed have the potential to cause that characteristic discomfort that occurs when information collides with emotions, emotions born from preconceptions. But I humbly ask you, dear listener, to ignore this discomfort. Ignore the emotions and engage with the information presented, and using your reason, extract and assimilate the explanatory truths which you are unable to refute. This is, after all, the process all truth seekers must undergo, and take your time. You do not have to come to a conclusion right away. I am Dr. Daniel Stanislowski. While I hold a Ph.D. in molecular biology and biochemistry, I do not limit or pigeonhole myself because the truths of our world are not so confined as to be found exclusively in such specialized knowledge sets. And certainly, one's intellect ought not to be shackled by higher education. Indeed, if one allows one's mind to be so chained, the truths of our reality will float by completely unnoticed. Several years ago, I sensed for the first time that things were profoundly disordered in our world. This realization ignited in me a thirst for knowledge that would enable me to learn, understand, and explain the sources of this disorder. The journey toward understanding this disorder will lead to its cure. It is in this journey I sincerely hope you will join me and Eric on as we explore together broken secrets.
Welcome, everyone, to Tough Talks. As you just heard, I am joined tonight by Dr. Daniel Stanislowski. Daniel, thank you so much for hopping onto the stream with us this evening.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much for having me.
For those of you who are unfamiliar with where to find Daniel, he is a part of the Grand Forks Best Source Network. It is a radio network that you can find online. It's based out of, I believe it's Grand Forks, Minnesota, correct?
North Dakota.
North Dakota. Oh, okay. So I
Yeah.
totally have that geographically wrong. Here, so you're in the
We're
same
actually
time zone that
right
I
on the
am.
border. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, don't I feel sheepish? Anyway, y'all, Grand Forks, it's a larger network on which there are a litany of radio shows as well as a YouTube channel. There is something for everybody there. I saw sports. I saw a talk on the Great Reset. You have Dr. Daniel's show, which is all about open secrets, the dark underbelly and the dark machinations that sort of rule our world writ large. There is a ton of information that you can find if you start to delve into what Dan has available on his podcast. You'll find it on the Grand Forks Best Source YouTube channel here. His podcast is called Open Secrets, and it is not one for the faint of heart. Tonight we're going to be getting into, as Daniel pointed out, we're going to be getting into some heavy topics this evening, ones that have a very real and large potential to shake and shift your worldview. So I encourage you, if you delve down the rabbit hole and check out Daniel's podcast here, be prayed up and go in with a clear and open mind and listen to the information. You may feel that pinprick in the back of your mind that makes you want to essentially throw up the proverbial cross and close your eyes and plug your ears. But as truth seekers, we have to be able to contend with the uncomfortability that is learning. It is a fantastic podcast. I stumbled upon Dan's podcast a little over a month ago, and after hearing the very first episode that I had happened upon, it was all over America's secret establishment, the Order of Skull and Bones. I knew I had to get Dan on the show to talk about his research, talk about the work that he's doing, and his heart for seeing people elevate themselves and come to truth in whatever shape that takes for them and their lives. You can also find on Dan's website here. We have realcovidfacts.org. Lots of intense information on here. A few things that we may be getting into down the road. But for now, again, I wanted to say thank you again, Dan, for hopping on the podcast. We got a good show for you tonight, folks. This is going to be more on sort of the socioeconomic and political side of things. Of course, we will have some tie-ins to the Bible and the Word of God as well. But we're going to see, what the enemy is up to this evening.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The as you put it, the enemy, and that's a very good word for it. Actually, I never thought of that. But the enemy has been in power for a long time, and they use money, power, influence to buy science. And there has been a lot of science and different sciences and culture creation in play for a long time that is designed to work against you and I and to make us less than who we ought to be and who we are meant to be. And in so doing, actually deprives us of our happiness and our enjoyment of life and certainly virtue. And so it's time, the answers when we kind of dig into this and we kind of peel back the layers. Hopefully, you see. I ask people too always to kind of assess your own experiences with what I'm talking about. Assess how you feel when you sit down in front of a television and you see something that causes you to be disturbed. If you still are disturbed by things you see on television, because obviously people are massively, massively desensitized. But I think, I don't really like talking about myself. I think it's the worst subject in the world. But I think it might actually help people to know like what I was going through and where I
Yeah,
come
that's
from.
actually one of the questions I wanted to, it's a perfect segue. One of the first questions I have for you is, you mentioned that it sort of came to you this moment where you decided something is wrong here and I want to get to the bottom of this. Can you
So
describe for me when that took place and what that looked like for you and what the impetus was that really drove you down this road of study and then doing these very, very well-crafted presentations
yeah,
to reach people?
absolutely. So I guess it was about 10, 11 years or so ago. And it was 2014. I actually remember this now. I think it was in Ukraine. Nothing. I mean, it is related, I'm sure, to the current events. Um, but there was this peaceful kind of protest in Kiev. And now the details are kind of foggy, but like this protest in Kiev, where I think it's 2014, where you had a group protesting because they wanted to be joining the European Union, and while there was others that didn't want that, and like this seemingly peaceful protest, like overnight turned into like a slaughter. It was like horrible, and I'm like, what causes this? Like what this is so strange. What's happening? And I'm a very strong intuitionist. I like to think that anyway. Um, and I was just kind of like, what is this? And then you hear like these strange, like what would be considered conspiracy theory ideas, and that just set me on a journey, and you go through you have to be, very discerning because there's a lot of within the conspiratorial ranks. There's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, all of these things, and things that are really dark. And so you got to be very careful when you tread into these waters. But I was looking for what is real, like what is going on, and then I actually found them. I highly recommend. I mean, we all stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, and I've, I was looking for like what's really going on, and I found a guy named Alan Watt, Watt. Alan Watt. There is an Alan Watts with an S, not that one. Alan Watt, who passed away a few years ago, but he had a podcast where he was talking about this stuff for years, really, and a couple three, four of the books I did for Open Secrets were from him. He said, like, here's these books, these very much writing books and telling the world what they were doing. Um, Eric, are you still there?
Yeah, signal's kind of cutting in and out a little bit.
Hello?
Yep, I'm still here.
Hello?
I was on.
I think I lost you. You okay?
Let's see. Message there.
Okay.
1 second there, folks.
Yep.
Oh man, little technical difficulties on our end over here, folks. Don't worry. We'll be back up and running here in a second. I'm gonna try and get Dan back at it here for us. And here we go. Looks like he's popping in here. Bear with us just a moment. There we go. There we are.
Okay, so yeah, my apologies.
No, no,
I don't
you're
know if that
good.
was on my end or what. But so yeah, the insight into things. And so it started me on the journey to like actually, what is going on, to see what's going on so I could explore for myself. And so then I mean, I have some books up behind me. Whoa, there we go, behind me there. And I have actually a lot more, but we're in the process of moving, so we're like they're all packed away. But like to try and understand, so you can tell people like, hey, this is what's happening in our world, and we need to come together and truly put in a strong effort to understand and then stop what's happening. And it's not going to happen if we certainly sit in front of TV and can keep doing the exact same things that we're doing, you know. But so that's how like this intellectual journey started. But then, and I was in graduate school eventually there, and I was learning about molecular biology and biochemistry. That's what my degree is in. And I was just, it's obviously, bought and paid for by big pharma. I mean, it's pretty obvious. I was learning the mechanisms of how these things, the nitty gritty of how that stuff works. And I could tell that it's how pharmacology operates. It's not going to cure anything. It's actually impossible. And so I was kind of like, like what's going on? Like why doesn't my professor see this? Why can't other? And then you start to like zoom out, and you're like, there are hundreds of thousands of institutions that push this stuff dogmatically, and then the students and teachers themselves aren't able to see outside of this paradigm, which means there's a massive indoctrination campaign to which we have all been subjected. And so I was already kind of like, I got to get out of science, because it's impossible working in this system to actually do any good for people's health. So
Now,
thank good.
was this when you were sort of were you working in the field at this time when you sort of started coming to these realizations?
Well, I was in graduate school when I started, um,
Okay.
realizing, especially again, like I was learning like it's actually physically impossible for pharmacology to like actually cure. It's not going to happen, um, and we can get into the details about that later. But then I started my research career, and I finished my PhD in 2019, November, and then uh, the plague came. Um, and as I actually started my first job in March of 2020,
Oh
and
wow.
all the while, the plague is rolling out, so to speak. And I was looking at all the research coming out, and wasn't convinced that it was what they were saying it was. And and I have a lot. I have a very one of my abilities is research, and to really dig into information. And when we locked down, it's my second week on the job, and we're like all locking down, and I'm like, all of these PhDs and my colleagues that I'm working with, they all just went along with this, no questions asked, no no words in opposition, like no thoughts in opposition. And this is one of the things that's required intellectually for like scientific progress, is that you question things, you're skeptical, and it was
Mhm.
completely absent. And so, I went into my basement to do my career in molecular biology, and I'm like, this isn't right. And when we had to come back into the lab, we had to all wear masks. And I told my immediate supervisor, I'm like, I'm not going to wear a mask. They don't work. And there's tons of science that says they don't work. And he said, why don't you write something up about this? So I did. I wrote a paper that has over 200 references on how awful and masks are, how that's actually physically impossible for them to stop. And not only that, it has negative health effects. And so we shouldn't be doing this. And so I got in trouble. But then,
Wait, but and he's the one who told you to write the paper?
yeah, and then he kind of kicked it up the food chain, and I got in even more more trouble, because
Oh
this
my
is
gosh.
and there's it was a surreal kind of situation. And so when I got to the point when I could leave this job and go talk about masks and then what came later, the jab or the dose, we'll call it, I did. And that's when I joined Midwest Public Health Coalition. And so it was April of 21, we started going out and doing public seminars. And so we were doing seminars on how devastatingly bad the jab is. And now, like, we don't even, and I haven't talked, like, another part of my mindset too at that time was like, I'm only gonna be talking about this jab for a year, because I can't sit there and talk about the same thing for my career. Like people do that and they make money, but that doesn't help anything really.
Yeah.
And what I want to find solutions and then resolve problems. And we don't even need to get any of the so-called conspiracy theories about the jab, because just the way that they tell you it works, we can hang them. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, and there is no excuse for medical doctors whatsoever, because if you have an MD, you know what DNA, RNA, and proteins are, and so you are without excuse. And so if you're pushing the jab, you should minimum lose your license, because it operates by creating the spike protein in your body. And if you're a medical doctor, ostensibly you can read scientific literature. All you got to do is go to PubMed, spike protein, put it in there, and it's been studied in all kinds of different, paradigms, in heart and lung and brain and blah, blah, blah. And the spike protein destroys all of the tissues it touches. So they're putting it out there that the mechanism of action, how this jab works, has high potential to destroy your life and cause you great harm. And the entire establishment acted clueless and just said, we're gonna do it because vaccines are, it's like angels descend from heaven and fill all those little vaccine vials. It's ludicrous. There's no thinking whatsoever. And so, when the year came up, of doing these seminars, and we did it all across like North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, with some big crowds. I know for a fact that I helped a lot more people in this time doing these seminars than I would in an entire career of, mixing chemicals together and making meaningless publications.
Wow.
And so
It's
and
like boots on the ground type of help. I mean, like you're there
right.
one-on-one talking to them, getting them information they need.
Absolutely. And if they say, no, I'm not going to take the shot, thank you, Dr. Stanislowski, I'm not going to take the shot now. Boom. Thank you. Yes. Awesome. Thank you. I'm glad I could help you, because that's a tremendously good thing, and so that, that we did a lot of help there, but then the whole jab, almost said it, the whole jab story kind of went by the wayside, which I was thankful for in a sense, because then I could focus on the open sequence material, where you get into the real truths that no one talks about and no one considers, but they touch every single human's life that is in even like a second world country or above. It's like, if you have electricity and digital entertainment, these guys are attacking your brain. And so I dug into the information. There's a lot of research into the history, which is a very important thing, the history, and then, the culture creation and why the plague, the C19 plague happened. So I think what I mentioned to you, Eric, is I kind of wanted to, like, maybe we start by unpacking what happened during, the plague, because it's something that's fresh in our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone hopefully remembers how they felt and what they were thinking or not thinking, reacting to, I guess is the better way to put it, when this started. Because in my mind, what happened with C19 was one of the crowning achievements of the masters of the world, what they were able to do, and the power they were able to demonstrate. And the way I initially, start this conversation usually is I say, you know, never in the history of mankind has almost all people on planet Earth willingly locked themselves in their homes. And then almost all people on planet Earth willingly put a mask on their face. And then almost all people on planet Earth lined up to take a squirt in their arm. You know? And that tells you that there is a mechanism of human behavior control, therefore human thought control, the likes of which the world has never seen before, and that there are people behind this thing that are doing this intentionally to us. And, so the very first book I do on open secrets is a book called Political Ponerology. And what this book is about psychopathy. And, a lot of people tend to project their own moral systems onto the world around them, and they see everything with these rose-tinted glasses. And that's just not the way reality is. I mean, certainly your everyday Joe, like next door neighbor, probably isn't a psychopath, right? But
we hope anyway.
yeah, we hope. I mean, I guess I think the prevalence of psychopathy is like 1% or something like that. I don't think I've ever met a psychopath, but maybe they do hide themselves very well. But there are complete psychopaths in this world. There are people that think that you and I are not humans. They see us as something else, and therefore they have no problem wiping us out. And one thing we know, maybe not about the virus itself, but certainly about the jab, is that they are unleashing hyper lethal force against us, against mankind. I apologize, the sun's getting in my face there, but hopefully
that's all right.
But so people understand, like, you look at the jab, there's a lot of genius that went into this thing. I mean, the mRNA is a modified mRNA, and to make the mRNA last a really, really long time in your body. And I haven't looked at any of the science on this stuff for a year, but when towards the end of my looking into it, it was, I think one of the studies only went 6 weeks long, and after 6 weeks, they still found full mRNA and spike protein in people's bodies. And for those who don't know, mRNA is not stable at all. It goes into your body, and your body destroys it instantly. It doesn't usually last very long, and they got this mRNA to last weeks, for the full length of the study. So it's stunning. It's actually stunning. And that alone, and then the engineering of the spike protein in this thing, it takes people who know exactly what they're doing to do this thing. And now if I'm a guy in the lab saying, hey, why were we engineering a spike protein shot that we're going to inject into, all of humanity? I would be absolutely not. I would say, you all must be arrested, and for attempted crimes against humanity. But they unleashed crimes against humanity. I mean, the way I put it is if you have a 6-month-old and you put an iPad in front of their faces, you're subjecting them to the masters, and the masters are going to be committing crimes against humanity against your 6-month-old, because you're inculcating them into a system that wants to dominate their mind from birth to death. And so here we have just one tiny little aspect of what these guys are doing, which is the jabs, which is horrendous. I mean, it's killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. Again, I haven't looked at the last I looked, it was well over a year ago, and what the VAERS database was saying was something like 40,000 people were killed by the shots. And VAERS has an underreporting factor of potentially 40 or so. So all those numbers, you got to multiply by 40, and that's just the United States of America, right? And then you have a political regime that is doing all of this. It's political theater to get people to think everything's okay and everything's normal, to kind of work us through and normalize us to the new system that they're bringing in, And so there's a tremendous amount of evil that is involved with C19. And then you have, again, the total mind control that and it's potent too. Like, people, like, it's not infallible. Obviously it's not infallible, right? If it was, I want to make that statement too before we get too deep. It's like, they don't have total control. If they did, you and I wouldn't be having this conversation, right? We wouldn't be having these thoughts if they had total control, actually, So it's important that you people realize, well, we must fight back. We have a chance. We can still fight back. Humanity is currently at a very precarious situation where, we're teetering on the brink of this next generation system that they're going to be bringing in, and that involves the blockchain central bank digital currency systems, which is even more robotic and less human system than we were born into, which is already a very robotic and inhuman system. But we still have a chance to stop this, or at least, use these things for good. Because some of those technologies are actually could benefit mankind. They could, but they're not going to, because again, the psychopaths sit on top of the heap, if you will. But this behavior control system is also incredibly potent, though. I mean, humans are the most studied thing on planet Earth, period, and we've been studied for a very long time. And there's a couple techniques, I guess, in this I'll talk about. One of them is rule by experts. A man named Bertrand Russell, he wrote a book called The Scientific Outlook. He actually also wrote a book called The Impact of Science on Society. I did the Impact of Science on Society in one of my Open Secrets episode, but in The Scientific Outlook, which came out in 1930, I want to say, he talks about how a day is going to come where people will be unable to think for themselves, and they will simply follow the guide of experts and expert opinion, and all of which the Bertrand Russell and his ilk will be providing. And so if you look what happened, I mean, the same thing happened in 9/11, but with the plague, it was even more refined, if you will, because you had this horrible, event happen, and then people are all scared. When you're scared, you're hyper emotional. Obviously, it goes without saying, but then you're also not rational, and so we're all gathered around our television sets. Especially after lockdown, right? Everyone, the only source of information is the TV or your cell phone. When I say TV too, I usually mean all digital media devices. But so you're locked in front of this thing as your only source of information to the outside world, and they just trot the experts across your television screen that reassure you, make you feel better, and offer you this simple solution. And because you're primed for that solution, you accept it. And then you accept the narrative right away. There's very little questioning. It's, oh, thank goodness Anthony Fauci is there, because otherwise we'd all be doomed. That type of thing. That's what you feel. And so then you willingly go along with everything, and they hyper emotionalize everything, right? There is
that's such a thing right there. I heard some statistics the other day about the reading efficacy of a lot of schools in big cities, a lot of inner city schools, and in some school districts, 100% of the students were unable to read at level, and it was like 98% to 100% of those same students couldn't even perform math at
right.
grade level. And
Right.
you've even mentioned in your show that when you have a poverty of ability in the realms of reading and mathematics, it makes it so that you can no longer think critically.
Right.
And every decision that you make from there on out is going to be way more slanted towards an emotional impetus, and then an emotional response driven solely by the emotions that you feel in the moment, versus you being able to actually take a moment, think through it critically, and then make the best decision given the information that you have. And we saw that over the last, I'd say, was it now? We're about 4 years.
Yes.
And a prime example of that is even just if you step into the realm of social media on Twitter, now called X, you can watch in real time a little seed get planted, and then the addiction to outrage overpowers people's rational centers of their mind, and suddenly it is nothing but pure emotion being vented as though that's the realest thing you could ever try and attain to.
Right.
And although emotions are very real, we have to factor them through truth. And I've seen such a succumbing to the emotion over logic and over real understanding in the last few years.
Oh yeah, and we all like to think we're incredibly enlightened people too, and the opposite is true. And so this hyper emotionalism, and a little more on that too, on the education. Before I get back to the emotionalism,
Real quick, are you on a laptop by chance?
Yes, I am.
I might have you just shift a little bit. That sun's like starting to really slice in on your face there.
Yeah. Uh, I'm actually. Honey, can you put the shade up? Yeah. There come my wife.
Oh, oh,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, yeah. That'll be better because.
Thank you, Mrs. Stanislowski.
Yeah. Um. Sorry, I should have planned that a little better.
You're
But
good, man.
so the way I put this too is, there is, especially about the education of the youth, is that there is a mass casualty event coming. There is, and if it's if it's not, the C-19 shots killing everyone that takes him, if it's not World War III, some EMP or nuke goes off. If it's not any of those things, our children are so horribly uneducated, so horribly earth. And if you, that means we have infrastructure to support life for approximately 8 billion people. And we're going to be plugging in people who are totally inept into this infrastructure. So every facet of this infrastructure is going to collapse, and thus life will not be supported for approximately 8 billion people. And I've even the 20 somethings, I know people that work at colleges, and they talk about it all the time, like, like the like flight instructors are saying, yeah, I have this like 20-year-old, 22-year-old kid who's about to get in his plane, and I'm telling him instructions on how to fly a plane that are very
Oh my
important. And
gosh.
he's just scrolling, you know. So we're we need to change things fast. That is true. We do have the ability to change things still, but we must do it quickly. With it, and I don't mean like, like tomorrow, obviously, but I mean like within, a decade.
Put
We
the
got to
plan
get
into action.
right. We got to get the ball rolling here, and um, so so like back to the hyper emotionalism, and I was, because I was walking around town not wearing a mask in those, glory days. I was hoping for people, someone to come at me, but it didn't happen to me. But I've heard stories, and maybe some, maybe other people are exposed to too. Of people will absolutely just pop off on someone for not wearing a mask, and just yell at them, and they get thrown out of stores, or and all these things, and it just shows you that there is a physical, neurological adaptation to what's going on, and that is true. I mean, the system we live in is designed to make you neurologically, emotionally attached to it. And so when you hear someone saying masks are bad for you, you're trained to be like, nope, that is anathema to my mind, and you're a horrible person, and you should die. That's a very much a
Mhm.
dehumanizing process. Um, and so um, that's how some of that works, and it's massive propaganda. And there are large think tanks. People get paid very well, very handsomely to put these formulae together, and how to broadcast this stuff so that people, as many people as possible, will be captured within this net of mind control. And so with C-19, they did an absolute wonderful job. I mean, I sit in awe actually of the evil genius that is at play, and I think, like, boy, what if these guys were working for good? Where would we be as humanity? We're very far off from that. Another technique of the behaviorism and mind control is the cult of personality. And, that is the created thing that you see on television that you are trained to just think is superior to you in all ways, shape, or form. And therefore you follow what they say. And I want to talk about the one that is in vogue now, and that is Mr. Elon Musk.
Mhm.
Elon Musk is an actor. He is. There is nothing real about Elon Musk. And if you look at, start by looking at his companies. He has, start PayPal, which is a bridge to the instant payment blockchain networks. He has the electronic vehicles. He has the Starlink, which is, putting satellites out in space, the, potentially a global spy grid. He has SpaceX, so shooting things into outer space. Really cool guy, right? And then he has Neuralink, so brain hacking, brain chipping. All of this stuff is fourth industrial revolution companies. And now they're painting him as this conservative. conservative guy. So they're selling the fourth industrial revolution through Elon Musk to the conservatives. Now, when I look at Elon Musk, Bill Gates is another beautiful example. They always say that these guys are the richest guys in the world. That's another thing you must disabuse yourself of, is these guys are not even close to the richest people in the world. The richest people in the world own central banks, for example, right? They own the control and they monopolize money creation. Yeah, so that's why you never see, you'll never see real power on television, because real power, if you can see it, then you know who's doing it and you can go after it, right? That's why, and these guys again are committing such unbelievable, horrible crimes against humanity that if we knew that, we came to that realization, they'd be donezo, which that's, one thing we need to do is we need to smoke these guys out and stop them. Yeah. And by that, I mean, send them to the Lord and let him deal with them. But so Elon Musk is a perfect example of that. People, and if you watch carefully his interviews. He actually does not say anything intelligent. I mean, it's all just simple 6th grade level jibber jabber that comes out of this man's mouth. But he has this mystique of being the richest man in the world, so he must know something. He must be just absolutely
right.
brilliant.
It's like he put this company together that does all these amazing things. Like clearly, he has his finger on the pulse of what the real is.
Right. And if you and I got $100 million grant from the government to make electronic cars, even though I know nothing about electronics, I could, hey, give me that money, I'll work on it too. But and that's another thing. How does he get that money? How does he get all these grants? It's truly a fascinating thing. But to me, I look at him and he is an actor to which a bank account is attached. And when the masters of the world need to sell ideas or get humans to do what they want them to do, you put the actor out there, and then you pump a bunch of money into the projects that this actor is, heading up. Same thing with Bill Gates, another guy who's clearly brain dead. To me, I mean, again, he doesn't say anything intelligent. He sounds like a moron to me. But people love him because money. We're mind controlled to love this thing called money. And if someone is a billionaire, then they must be just a billion times better than us, right? So they must know. So I'm going to be scared and therefore follow Bill Gates, right? Same process. Unfortunately, this process is now true for politics, and actually has been true for politics for a number of years, as we exposed in The Creature from Jekyll Island. If we had a real president, that really cared about us, there are a number of things that they would get rid of instantly, but one of them is the central bank. It'd say, central bank, bye-bye. We're doing it the right way. Because the United States of America actually had a wonderful monetary system. I think it was called the Coinage Act of 1791. And one of the few things the founding fathers agreed upon is that you can't have fiat money. You just can't do it. It's horrible. Every time it happened before then, it turned out horribly, right? And when I say that too, it's easy because, when you talk money, it just sounds like statistics, right? But it kills people. Horrible monetary policy and fiscal policy causes death, and sometimes en masse. And so the central bank that we currently have is actually the fourth central bank that America has had. And this one has been in play since 1914. And it was passed in very scandalous ways, and the masters of the world were in on that. And so that tells you how long, at least, that we've been in a system that was under control of someone else, under control of people. We are no longer operating on the values of the United States of America. We're no longer operating on a constitution-based system. It is someone else's. It's a money game. And now too, it's very much a crony capitalist money game where they're merging our systems with the communist system. And actually, sorry, I'm totally ranting here, so I hope that's all right. But Vladimir Lenin had a very interesting critique of capitalism, and he said that what happens in capitalism, you have this managerial class, and he's not talking about your manager at your local Target, right? He's talking about the money managers, the big time managers of capitalism. He says what's going to happen is you have this inner core of the managing class, and then you have all the labor class around it. And what's going to happen is this manager class is going to accrue more and more wealth to the detriment of this labor class. And while in the good old days of the United States of America, the labor class lived very well. We had a very affluent lifestyle. That is long gone now. I mean, it is, people are getting poorer and poorer all the time, but we just accept it because they send the Federal Reserve Chair out there, or the Secretary of the Treasury, and say, yep, inflation is now this. Of course, they're all lying to you and they control all this stuff. But again, it's impoverishing us. And again, that kills people. That kills lots of people. And it does not have to be this way. Another very interesting thing that Vladimir Lenin said was society and culture can go forward and end up in 1,000 different ways. But we make it seem like what is happening is the only possible way that it could ever have been. So we need to, bring justice to the system,
Mm-hmm.
and go forward in a new way. And we have to throw off the old biases of capitalism versus communism to keep you in this dialectic. Does that sound familiar? The Democrat Republican, they keep you in this two-party system where, again, there could be 1,000 parties. Why aren't there 1,000 parties vying for power? Why is it only these two? And why has the conservatives, and that's another word that needs to go away, because while I would classify myself as a conservative, there's nothing to conserve anymore. The masters of the world have, eaten the whole pie, and they're leaving us these little breadcrumbs to fight over. If we're passing laws to say, define what a man and a woman are, we've lost. It's over. It's ball game.
Isn't that wild? I was talking with my wife earlier today, and we were musing on the luxury that it is to live in a society that has, at least on the surface, an appearance of such prosperity. Sort of in the table of nations and the table of the timeline of those nations, almost every nation, actually I should say pretty much every nation writ large goes through a cycle. Typically, you go from being enslaved, to being freed, going from freedom to success, success into abundance, abundance into apathy, apathy into dependency, dependency back into slavery. Right now, we are at the stage of dependency, for sure, here in the United States. Dependency in such a degree that while there are real world problems happening all around the globe, we have people starving in nations. We have people starving here. We have people on the streets. We have a homeless epidemic. We have an education epidemic. We have real world issues of violence in the streets. And yet people have the luxury of going online and complaining about their gender. They have the luxury of going online and complaining about being misgendered. They have the luxury of going online and complaining about their favorite makeup influencer going toe-to-toe with another makeup influencer, and just the addiction to this outrage. It's like, wow, there was a time when you could watch people actually care for their neighbor and care enough to want to do something physically to help them. But instead, somebody says one thing online that, oh, well, that hurt my feelings, but not just my feelings, that could have possibly hurt this whole clutch of people's feelings. So let me go ahead and do battle on their behalf, even though they have no idea who you are, what you've said, or where you come from. Like, what a luxury that is. And then for people to lock their brains away in this black mirror 8 hours out of a day, just scrolling the feed. You said it actually in one of your streams. An abundance of information creates a poverty of attention.
Yes.
People have lost not just the ability to critically think, but lost the ability to focus and focus on what they're seeing in front of their eyes, but being told to not pay attention to.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, I was, it was like last summer, I was somewhere, and I saw this child who's probably, I don't know, 6 or 7, being given an iPad, and they put TikTok on there.
Oh, God.
And like, it's like I'm listening, all I can hear, I can only hear the sounds coming from this TikTok, and it's like 15-second videos, just one after another. There's no pause, and there's no logical connection from one video to the next. And this kid's, I'm watching him too, and he's just staring blankly. And I'm like, this poor child, his brain is forever changed. And because I'm assuming this wasn't his first go around with that. But I had the blessing to, when I was studying in graduate school, I worked on the dopamine system. And so that's the people call it the pleasure molecule, and it does have a lot to do with pleasure, but it's also the anticipatory molecule. Actually, dopamine in your brain is highest when you're anticipating and you're desiring something. And these video screens, all video screens, cause dopamine release in your brain when you look at them. Okay. And other things that cause dopamine release are, of course, like the hard drugs, cocaine, methamphetamines, these things. They give what is very close to methamphetamine called amphetamine to children for ADHD, by the way. They just call it Adderall, but it causes dopamine flux in your brain. Um, Eating sugar is actually way more addictive than cocaine is. And they put all kinds of high fructose corn syrup, for example, monosodium glutamate. These things are in all our food, so they have attacked us through our food system as well, and we can get into that one as well. But sex causes massive dopamine release, and pornography is an absolute horrible plague upon society. I actually, when I was trying to, because I obviously can't work in science anymore and I don't want to, but if I did want to, I would not be able to because of coming out and telling the truth about what was happening with the plague and stuff. Um, but oh no, I just lost my train of thought. Dang it. But so we have, yeah. So I was looking for like jobs, and I actually got to write a few articles for the Epic Times. But a few of the articles they didn't publish of mine, which I'm like, what are you doing? I wrote a huge article on pornography and pornography addiction and how mind-numbingly bad it is. I mean, it's so terrible. And I pick apart the little pieces of it. I thought it was a really good article, but people have no idea how prevalent it is. I mean, the most popular websites in the world after like the Google and YouTube are all pornography websites. And they get billions. I think one of them had like 13.2 billion visits in a year. 13.2 billion visits in a year. That's just one website. And these things that destroys your soul. It destroys your emotions. It destroys your connections to people around you. It destroys your sense of real and what's good and what's normal. And this stuff is foisted upon us. I mean, this stuff should be made illegal. It would go a long way to curing what's going on, just getting rid of pornography. But that stuff, all of these things operate through the dopamine system. And that system is very much manipulated when you turn on your television, and they make you desire or afraid. Like when you see something that's fearful, like what happened with the plague when they first talked about it and they started these lockdowns. And then what was beautiful, well, I say beautiful because I admire the evil genius, but it's not beautiful, it's horrible. But what they did is they recreated the 9/11 type mentality every single day. Every single day they were showing you death counts and case counts and showing you all these epicenters of this, and they show the fake hospital scenes of this and that. I'm like, if there's a real plague, I don't have to look at my television to know it because I'll see people dying out in the streets. It doesn't have to be this fictitious thing that they're creating that you only get information about from your television, your digital media device. So this perception of reality is very much changed by the screen you're looking at. And I actually get a little bit into that in the book, The Culture Industry Part 1 specifically, where it's called the aestheticization of reality, And that means making aesthetic your reality. So if you watch just for example, a bar scene or whatever, and you watch thousands of movies in your life, and you see 100 bar scenes before the time you're 21, and you go to a bar, your perception of what that experience ought to be is going to be totally crystallized by fake digital information coming from your screen.
So real quick, because what so far, like just from what we've been touching on here, with the plague that we had, and then the jab and all the hype surrounding it here. Again, folks, if you have not checked out Daniel's podcast, you need to go over to Grand Forks Best Source and hop on there and go down the rabbit hole on open secrets, because what took place over the last 3.5 years is a grand coalescence of literally every single topic that he has covered, every single tendril of this giant Cthulhu that is the establishment elite and the globalist regime. every single part of it was so fine-tuned, going back as early as 1933 all the way to 1983, with 150 years of Skull and Bone Society there, with all these dark undergoings now carried forward into the WEF, to NATO. Everything was so fine-tuned that it had its culmination in the event in 2020,
Right.
now carrying on into our lives. And it's so wild, having now seen all the episodes of your podcast and listened to them all a couple of times now. It is so wild to watch that whole ball unravel itself and then come right back together for that singular moment.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's like, in you can't write this.
No.
It's amazing how much stranger the truth is than any kind of fiction that we see on TV. And to your
Oh, yeah.
point about people getting this idea, this notion of what life could be or what life should be because of what they saw on a television set for years leading up to them into adulthood, and finally being able to go out and imbibe some alcohol if they want to. They already have this mental image of what it must be like to go to a tavern and hang out with people and throw some darts, shoot some pool, knock back a few brews, that they're walking into the situation, and they're now, having been imprinted upon by whatever they took in, they're now just putting that onto their surrounding for however long they decide to stay there and hold up the wall, chatting up whoever they hope they'll get lucky with.
Yeah. And so how that applies to the plague is you're watching these newsreels, endless newsreels saying it's doomsday, it's doomsday, it's doomsday. And then you go to your grocery store because you're out of bread and chicken or whatever, and your heart's, and you got your mask on, and you're just like, oh, I'm gonna die, I gotta, walk, stay 6 feet away, and all this stuff. That's because what the false narrative coming through digital. We live in very strange times, folks. Great times, but very strange. This digital information totally seeded your mind of what is actually happening out there, and it's not what was actually happening out there, And so that shows you the power, the technique that these guys have developed over a very long time. And it's also so, and they don't have absolute control. What they do have, in addition to all this planning and literally endless resources, is they have social media. Because people literally put all of their thoughts on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever. So if one of their plans goes awry, they will get instant feedback from hundreds of thousands of people tweeting about it, or doing whatever about it. And so they can say, oh, we're going too far here. We need to pull back. We can do more in this area. We need to send, Trump back out there and have him hug Fauci again, or whatever. I don't know. I'm just spitballing. But that's how this ball game works. And so it's important that people, stop believing what you see on television. I mean, truly, I think I've watched half a movie in the last, I don't know, 6 months, 7 months, something like that. And I fell asleep. I said half because my wife and I fell asleep, trying to watch it.
I've watched two. We watched
Yeah.
Confidence, which is one of my favorite Edward Burns films of all time. He's kind of a little known actor, even though he's done a ton. And Pulp Fiction. Those are the two.
yeah. So, but your brain changes. Like there's some and news too. They juxtapose Hollywood next to Fox News, and so it makes you think that Fox News is telling you what's real. But guess what, folks? It's just as produced. It's just as scripted, perhaps even more so, if possible.
The fight is rigged.
The fight is
rigged.
To keep you in this right-left paradigm, right? Republican, good, Democrat, bad. No, both bad, both awful. Both have brought us to where we are, folks. And and there's also along with that, it's like I call it now the Tucker Carlson effect. You can insert whoever you want into this, but if they're not talking about this stuff, folks, they're not on your side. I'll just put it that way. And
Amen.
What Tucker Carlson does for people is he gives them catharsis, because Tucker Carlson's talking about this now. Therefore, it's taken care of. Therefore, I can sit here with my beer and my bag of potato chips and just come back tomorrow and watch it again and again and again and again and again and again. And this is another very powerful technique that they use to neutralize people. They want Tucker Carlson out there. They absolutely need Tucker Carlson out there. I mean, and Donald Trump too. It's like, if can you imagine if Hillary Clinton was in the White House during the pledge? It would have been a different ballgame. The conservatives would have been doing something else instead of just going along with the program.
I
It would have
picture
been
the book. I picture the book Empire from the author who wrote Ender's Game. It's funny you mentioned the the left and the right side of things. I heard it described actually on Timcast IRL this last week. You have CNN. What it boils down to: here's all the things you're not allowed to think and say and do and be. You have Fox. Here's what you're allowed to think and allowed to say and allowed to be and not be considered alt-right.
yeah,
Here's the outer limit for you here.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. And another aspect of that too is you have mainstream media, right? And then you have alternative media. And generally, it's not exclusively true, but generally what alternative media's function is to just simply respond to mainstream media. They talk about the exact same talking points, they just give the alt-right view, if you will, or alt-media view, but what they're doing is they're keeping everyone on the same wavelength, the same narrative, and believing that the same system must go forward. And if for those that have watched Open Secrets, the culture industry, I think the culture industry, the first episode is my best episode. I think it's actually a very powerful episode. But the main function of the culture industry, primary thing it must do is to maintain the status quo. Because as long as these guys get to be in the shadows and hide and keep manipulating us, it's all good. They really don't care what's happening. I mean, they're willing to take a loss, and be like, hey, we got to delay our plans now for 10 years. They don't care. They work in generations, which implies that there are families and lineages that are on top of this heap. And then, there's actually the technocratic families. So the science families like the Darwins and the Huxleys. And then you have the financial elite. And I believe it's Julian Huxley. People are more familiar with Aldous Huxley. Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World, which is an awesome allegory for what we're going through. It's actually one of the most ahead of its time books ever. It came out in like 1931. And when I read it, it's quite clear that they already knew what genetics were, and this a fine-tuned mode of inheritance. But Aldous Huxley's books, that really Brave New World Revisited are like his good ones. I read some of his other ones, which are not very impressive. But his brother, Julian Huxley, however, is a very impressive character. And Julian Huxley was the first president of UNESCO, which is the United Nations Education, Science, and Culture Office. And then Julian Huxley was the president of the British Eugenics Society. Eugenics is selective breeding. There's positive eugenics and negative eugenics. We are subjected to the negative kind, where you stamp out the reproduction of the unclean, if you will, the useless eaters, the ones that they don't want around, which is all of us. We'll get a lot more into that subject in the future. But Julian Huxley also helped Margaret Sanger found Planned Parenthood. So the man who wants to educate your children doesn't want them to see the light of day. And that tells you how our education system is now producing children who can't read. 100% of children, like you mentioned, some of them can't read up to grade or do mathematics at their grade level, right? And it's because they're being subjected to the UNESCO indoctrination schema. But Julian Huxley said that he is of the technocratic elite, the producers of our reality, if you will, and that they serve the financial elite. Now, the Huxleys were, doing their thing in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, right? So already over a generation ago, 2 generations ago, right? The Huxleys were also, just so you know how far back this goes, their grandfather, Thomas Huxley, was known as Darwin's bulldog, because him and Charles Darwin were, pushing the theory of evolution. And the theory of evolution is responsible for how many deaths? I mean, if we weren't inculcated into the theory of evolution, abortion doesn't exist. Abortion is the number one cause of death in the world, bar none. It's not even close. And this again shows you how adapted physically even I am. Totally, right? I'm like, well, not totally. I'm trying to pull the hooks out, but it takes years. It takes a lot of work.
It does.
But
It's unlearning that has to happen, you know? It's like you're having to go against your nature, and really engage willpower. I mean, there's a reason why it's called one
yeah.
of the fruits of the spirit is self-control, because you have to manifest that.
Oh, absolutely. You got to practice it. You got to work at it day after day after day after day, and you will lose some battles, of course, but you got to get up and keep going. But to show you how normalized and again adapted physically, when I say that I mean neurochemically, because neurochemistry is part of our physical body. We're physically adapted to the system. Is that the number one cause of death in the United States, at least before they overturned Roe versus Wade? I'm sure it will still be number one though. Is abortion, and it was almost a million babies are aborted in this country every year. You know, and any other species would revolt. I mean, we would be in absolute uproar and would have overthrown the system many, many moons ago. But they have so inculcated us into the system, so indoctrinated us, so domesticated us, so backed us into a corner that when our own kind is being slaughtered, we say, half of us at least say, good, keep doing it, keep killing, keep killing, keep killing. That is the extent of mind control and how bestial a level we have been reduced to, you know? So I can think of hundreds of reasons to topple the government, but to save a million babies, let's do it.
Yeah, right.
Let's
Sign me up.
let's stop it, you know? So again, but that just shows you the tremendous layers in history that we are up against, you know, that must come to an end, for us, for good to come from humanity once again. So, so no, that was the end of that thought there.
No, it's so on the nose for the time right now. 100%. Because like for those of us out there who cleave to a faith, who have a hope for tomorrow, for those of us out there who do know the end from the beginning, um, there's this there is still an emotional pull within you to be discouraged. There is still this war internally that you have to battle back every single day.
Yes.
Because while we do know that our eternity is secure, you know, we secure rewards and can lose rewards on a day-to-day basis, which James points out very clearly for us in his epistles when we talk about faith, and without works it being dead. There is still that world weary understanding that we have, that while we are very heavenly minded, we're still in a world, a physical world, with consequences for everything that we say and do. And I saw so many otherwise well-intentioned Christian individuals between 2020 and I'd say 2021, midway through the year, who de-evolved into stark, raving, afraid lunatics.
Yeah.
It was as though their faith was not strong enough to hold them up and endure when they were tested the most. And the only way that you stay armored up inside this world, the only way that you can stay mentally sound is if you are in your good book on a regular basis, is if you are consistently trying to draw closer to God. Because as Christians, we should be the most mentally sound creatures that walk the planet. Right. We should be the most mentally sound, period, because of who stands for us, who we trust in, and who has our back, who we can call on at a moment's notice. Doesn't mean that we won't suffer those physical ills that are part and parcel to a fallen world, but to watch so many people suddenly seemingly abandon their good sense and abandon what they knew to be true because of all this fear porn they were being bombarded with, it was really, really disheartening. And I just want to read real briefly here. We have straight from the mouth of Jesus himself in the book of John. Let me pull it up here. This is kind of a good little segue here, and we'll be coming right back into the fray here in a moment, folks. But this is Jesus flat out telling us Look, I've overcome the world. He says, I have said these things to you in figures of speech. The hour is coming when I will no longer speak to you in figures of speech, but will tell you plainly about the Father. In that day you will ask in my name, and I do not say to you that I will ask the Father on your, and do I not say, sorry, and I do not say to you that I will ask the Father on your behalf. For the Father himself loves you, because you have loved me and have believed that I came from God. I came from the Father and have come into the world, and now I am leaving the world and going to the Father. This is when he's about to be heading off for his crucifixion here. His disciples said, now you are speaking plainly and not using figurative speech. Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. Jesus answered them, do you now believe? Behold, the hour is coming. Indeed, it has come when you will be scattered, each to his own home, and will leave me alone. Yet I am not alone, for the Father is with me. I have said these things to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world.
Mhm.
Hang your hat on that, ladies and gentlemen, because that is the truth there. We
Yeah.
will have trials and tribulation. We will on a massive, massive scale, but our Redeemer has overcome the world on our behalf. So now what do we do with the time that is left to us between here and our eternity? We don't have the option of sitting on the sidelines. We don't have the option of staying silent, knowing that on the one hand, we are justified by faith, but we secure our eternal rewards through the acts that our faith begets. We don't have the option of sitting back and watching those around us go stumbling into the fire.
Yeah.
So what do
And
you
I'll say,
do? Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
a Christian is not a doormat, right?
Yes.
We just walked over by the government because the government exists. That's one thing. Thank you. Actually, I want to talk about this too, because there's a lot of confusion about, government is good, so we ought to just follow it, right? Well, yeah, if the government is good and not committing crimes against humanity, against us in several different ways, then yes, you ought to follow rightful authority, certainly. But it's a Hegelian philosophy to think that just because the government exists, I have to follow it. Because
Hmm.
by that logic, you would have to follow the USSR's government, which slaughtered 60 plus million of its own people, you know? And so
Or Maoist China.
or exactly, Maoist China, you name it, Nazi Germany, et cetera, et cetera. There's a long list of horrors that governments have committed. And those governments don't have a right to do that, quite obviously, right? That's obviously not something that God wants them to be doing, and the massive deception to which we are subjected is totally unlawful, totally evil, and I like to speak too about like the waking up from the trance that we were put into. I mentioned it takes a long time, and it does, because it is a very seductive system. It makes you want it. It makes you want to consume its products and become part of it and identify with it and be able to go to the bar and talk to your buddies about sports ball or X-Men or whatever. All those things feel really good, but you'll notice that when you do, first of all, it hurts, right? It takes a while. You got to give it time, and don't feel bad that your brain is still desiring these things, because it actually has
Hmm.
a lot of little mechanisms in there that turn on when you haven't had your fix in a while. You haven't had your ESPN, or if it is addicted to other sinful things. That happens, right? That's a common thing in our society. We are born into a system that wants you to sin. That says sin is good, and your parents thought that too, which is why they let you watch the movies about what it's like to be in a bar 100 times before you go off to college. And when you go off to college, you leave mommy and daddy, and you do all those things, and you become addicted to them. That's part of the system. That's part of the program, and it is, again, it's seductive. So it makes you like it. It makes you love your servitude, and so you don't feel bad when you start pulling away. But as you said, you must start, and you must put in the work to pull away from that system, and it takes time. And it is, for a lot of people, promotional. Everyone's going to have their own quirks to it, and it's going to be very specific for you. But there is hope. Of course, you have to do it. You have to be virtuous, right? And you can't do
Hmm.
that without God. It is actually impossible to be virtuous without God. And I think
Hmm.
we're coming to a a point in time where there is a lot of, how should I say, wheat and chaff being separated. That's what I notice about Midwest Public Health Coalition, my organization, is there's a lot of, like, truly, like, people that actively seek God. You know, it's not just Christian in name only. It's people who actually want to truth and have an active prayer life. And you can tell, you can tell that that's the case. But they were the ones that had the most impetus to go out and say, hey, no, this is wrong. We got to stop this. You know, it's amazing. And so there are people that are like you know, that want to help you take that next step and to become better and to become who you are born to be, you know. And it's a long process, like I said, but it is absolutely worth the fight. And
Hmm.
after, I mean, you'll notice after just a few weeks, maybe a month, maybe a little more, everyone's different, but you will stop desiring the stuff that you used to stop or that you used to indulge in constantly. It no
Yep.
longer looks fun to you, no longer seems, that doesn't have that same pull on you anymore.
Absolutely. Oh man, there is a fantastic book. It's called "It's Not Supposed to Be This Way." As a female author, I can't remember her name. She was loosely affiliated with, I want to say, either Bethel or Hillsong United. Thankfully, no broken theology shows up inside her book. But she talks in there of the the heartbreak that she suffered from her husband being sexually unfaithful to her, and this separation that occurred, and it was her entire world shattered in a second
Mhm.
once the knowledge of what had happened descended upon her. And the book is very much a almost like going through the five stages of grief on a spiritual side of things, and then coming to terms with who you are in the maker's eye, who he sees you as, what his grace for you actually looks like in form and function, and what you do now. And so there was this, she went through those sort of five stages of grief, and then it was this rebuilding process. And as she was going through, reconnecting really with God and plugging into the word and taking time to invest in herself and really kind of shuck off the the worldliness and the worldly cares and those pulls to want to just snuggle up in a blanket and just watch Netflix until you finally croak. She
Mhm.
had to put off all that. And one of the things that she said that was really, really impactful to me was with regards to who we are as children of God and who we claim to be every single time we make mention, oh yeah, we're a Christian. Um, while we're supposed to strive to live a sinful life, a sinless life, we're obviously not going to bat 1,000 in that department. Even Paul said, the very things I want to do, I don't do, and the very things I don't want to do, I do. Who will deliver me from this body of sin? Because he knows the struggle is so real. But when she was, making mention of that, she said, and as Christians, as those who do claim a heavenly Father and a place in his kingdom, you have to shun the sin. You have to shun those actions and behaviors that are so easy to fall into, especially when you're behind closed doors and it's just you. It's
Mhm.
just you and the machinations within your own mind, you left to your own devices.
Mhm.
So to say that taking that same train of logic, you have to apply it to willfully deciding what you will do with your time. We all have to work.
Mhm.
That's one of those necessary evils of the world. Although, given the millennium that is to come, it's going to be one of those joys that we have, because we need something to do. But we all have to work.
Yeah.
Okay. So, say you're working a regular 9 to 5 job 5 days a week. You're putting in your 8 hours for your boss. You're um, doing your fiduciary duty, but now what happens with the rest of your time? Well, you have family duties, okay? You tend to those. But you have to be quick to recognize what we're told in Proverbs 4, where you have to keep your heart with all vigilance, because out of it flow the springs of life. So what are you going to do with your leisure time? You have to be choosy with how you will spend your leisure time. Like you mentioned, the child having an iPad propped in front of it, and then TikTok put on, and all these 15-second clips of just mindless idiocy
Mhm.
flooded through its little oculars here. This you can't focus, you can't think, you can't even absorb. You have that poverty of attention. But we obviously need some leisure time. You need to use your rest as a weapon. So be choosy with how you will even entertain yourself. Be choosy with how you will spend that time resting. If you're going to watch a movie, choose what you want to watch instead of scrolling a feed in which you get no say over what bombards you and your sensible little feelings,
Yes.
um, by way of those eye gates. Be
Yeah.
choosy and be be defensive of your time.
Yeah.
And in so doing, like Daniel said, the first little bit may be tough, it may be hard, but you will find that you don't have the craving anymore for the mindless drivel. You won't have this bent towards, oh, I just want to numb for a while. I want to numb my brain for a while. You'll find yourself seeking those higher levels, not just of connectivity with your God, but also those higher levels of rest in which you get to decide exactly what you will do and how you will do it.
Yeah, very well said. And I like the analogy to like the unlawful husband, because the system is very much like that. It's like a mistress that you fall in love with, that, or your wife or whatever, that cheats on you constantly and is constantly wanting what's horrible for you, actually. And just as an example, like in the book The Next Million Years, written by Charles Galton Darwin,
Mm-hmm.
who was the grandson of Charles Darwin, another guy who was at one point the president of the British Eugenics Society. And he talks about and brings up some very powerful eugenical tactics, and that are they essentially they want to intellectually sterilize people, right? They want to adjust your value systems and the things you desire, the goals you have, the things you want to attain, to be totally materialist, so that instead of wanting a child, you want a Mercedes or something like that. Insert materialist consumer product here instead of something better. And this is why we in America are no longer at a reproduction rate that can replace the population. Because
Isn't that crazy?
yeah, you have to have a reproduction rate of 2.1. So for every two people, you have 2.1 children. The 0.1 because kids die, horrible accidents happen. But we're now at like 1.6 or something like that. So they've successfully, sterilized the United States of America and a large part of the West. But that's the thing. So you can see right there, that book was like 1952, something like that. So these, and they, we have this perception of the past, like there's a lot of these just, good old grandpa-like characters that just want this wonderful future for us, and they're working hard to make it for us. But the reality is exactly the opposite of that. And that's just an example of how when you watch your television over and over and over again, it doesn't matter. They put characters on there that they make you like, they make you identify with.
Relatable. Yep.
And then they have, like, it's a detective or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. And he's this good guy, he's a pretty moral dude, but he like sleeps around, or cheats on his wife, and that's just one example. That's just one out of 1,000 times you see that archetype played out over and over and over again. Guess what? That has a tremendous effect on the psyche of society, and because it affects individual psyche and it changes their mores, it changes their value system. And another point of like hope, because there is hope, you gotta have hope. There's the was it in the book COVID-19, The Great Reset, Klaus Schwab. He mentioned a study, and I didn't know this before I read it. I'm like, whoa, they World Health Organization predicted, the study came out in 2017, predicted that by the year 2030, the number one cause of death on planet Earth, not including abortion, of course, but the number one cause of death on planet Earth would be due to deaths of despair. So suicides, drug overdoses, alcoholism, that type of thing, right? And so they know this, and to them, that's great news. They're saying to themselves, pat each other on the back, we're doing a fantastic job. But the good news for us is that when you do break away from that system, that schema, you become happier. You find a nice new homeostasis, a nice balance in your brain, and your neurochemistry responds, and you find joys in the simple things. Mm-hmm. And for example, like I have 5 kids. My oldest child is 7 years old, and man, I love them. They do such awesome things. They're all so wonderful, and they make you so happy. And it's an incredible feeling that you cannot get through television. And so when you see 25, 30, 35, 40-year-old walking their dog down the street, by themselves, you're like, instead of a dog, you really want a child. That's what you're actually, your biology is to saying, well, hey, we need to reproduce. I want to make a baby, And because there's an awesome feedback between baby and daddy or mommy, that's much
Hmm.
better than doggy and daddy. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're saying like but you see those guys, you see all these 20 somethings, and like if they're just consuming the sports ball, reality, that their end one day in 2030 was most likely going to be deaths of despair. It's a horrible thing. But so I'm saying this is because breaking away from this is uh, uh, an absolutely worthy thing. You will not regret it for an instant. So
Absolutely. I mean, like the good book even tells us, desire to live that quiet life, desire to live peaceably with your neighbors. And sort of a big impetus for why we see such this poverty of mindset is, as you brought up before, is social media. The ability to have complete anonymity, should you so choose, while at the same time having no restrictions on what you can say to a person. No fear of reprisal, no fear of getting punched in the mouth for being some indolent little twit. Um, no fear, no repercussions in that immediate sense. Uh, and people, they go online and they behave in such a way that is abhorrent. And then they think that they can go and turn around and just be their happy-go-lucky self with their friends and family, as though their online persona is somehow separable from their real life persona. And unfortunately, the two are one. You can't separate that at all. The idea that you could is complete foolishness.
mhm.
And it only serves to make you look like a stark raving lunatic when you go online and denigrate somebody, their family. You wish all sorts of evil upon them, and then turn around. You're like, "Hey, send me all the cute puppy memes. I'm having kind of a bummer day today. Love you guys." Like there's such a duality of the mind that gets bombed, or that bombards people, that you're going to come off looking like an absolute a-hole, and no one's going to want to play your reindeer games anymore.
Mhm.
So one of the big talks that you had or that you have on your show, again, folks, please pop on over, if you got a moment now, hop on over to Grand Forks Best Source on YouTube and save this playlist of open secrets inside your library over here on YouTube. This is there's a lot of intense information inside here. There's a lot of worldview shaking and breaking information, but there was a lot of truth. There was an overabundance of truth, and the truth is hard to swallow, but swallow it you must. If you desire to live a strong life, if you desire to see yourself elevated, mentally and hopefully spiritually, you owe it to yourself. Pop on over there, check out Daniel's podcast. It is well worth the watch and listen. But back to the topic, one of your episodes dealt specifically with the fourth industrial revolution and the sort of technocracy that we end up, or that we're going towards. Like it's a very real thing. It's going to happen.
Mhm.
And this is straight out of the World Economic Forum. This is Klaus Schwab.
Yes.
And that to me right now feels like that's, almost like the book that we're living in currently right now.
Oh, absolutely.
um, and
100.
I wanted to get your thoughts on what you've seen in, say the last, because you mentioned 2014, that was really when you started to kind of come online, as it were, and decide a change has to occur. But what you've seen between 2014, 2020, and now currently, when we have things like the blockchain potentially being used to store information like who owns this house, who's married to who, do we have a birth certificate, shopping, living, etc. What have
Yes.
you noticed, and where do you see us heading societally?
Yeah. So thank you. That's a great question. The fourth industrial revolution is absolutely going to happen. It's happening right now. There is nothing that is stopping it. The World Economic Forum is essentially a place where public and private partnerships are formed and have been formed since 1970. And so you have the private industry colluding with government to monopolize everything and control everything. And then whatever their ideal set is what they want to bring in. And it's a very powerful thing too, because these guys are all for the by and large, very bright people, evil, and they're doing what's called reifying. That is to say, bringing in their ideal world into the physical world and bringing it into reality. And this is the one of the primary forms by which this occurs. Okay, and the fourth industrial revolution, again from the World Economic Forum, is all about automation. Now, we mentioned blockchain. That is a great place to start. And within blockchain, the in common parlance, it's cryptocurrencies. But what that is there's multiple technologies within cryptocurrencies, and you have payment currencies, you have actual currencies, you have non-fungible tokens, which you mentioned, and then you have smart contracts. So this is the vision of the future. My guess is what I'm about to tell you is going to be in play by 2030. I think that's a pretty easy guess, actually. And so what's going to happen is we are going to have wallets, digital wallets with a central bank. It might be like you'll be with your private bank, but it's basically it end up being a front for the central bank, where you store your digital wallet. In your digital wallet, you're going to have your digital identification, and they're undoing an old law. It was like from like 1880 or something, where it said you have like in order to Eric Rolon to sign your name, it has to be in black ink or blue ink, and you have to sign with your signature, and that's how you legally say I agree with this document. They're changing that into because you're going to be able to sign it using your digital identity from your digital wallet. And what's going to happen is if you own a house, there is going to be created a non-fungible token for your house. It's going to be the only non-fungible token or NFT of that kind, and that's also going to be stored within your digital wallet, along with the central bank digital currencies for the United States, which I'm guessing is going to be USDC, US dollar coin, something along those lines. And so what's going to happen is when you go to sell your house, you're going to engage in what's called a smart contract agreement. And you're going to have an app on it. It's just going to be all an app on your phone. And by the way, this cuts out, I mean, in one sense, I mean, it gets rid of a lot of pain points, to be perfectly honest. It does.
Inflation goes away.
Yeah, I mean, well, like dealing with banks that are incredibly slow goes away. It's like all the middlemen are gone. But guess what? Those middlemen are men and women. They're humans, right? So they no longer have jobs because we're talking about the fourth industrial revolution, where they need less human beings, which is another reason why the hyper lethal jabs are being unleashed. But so you're going to go to sell your house on this app, and you're going to have buyers. Maybe they can actually come look at your house, or they can just peruse what your house looks like on the application that you're using. And then when they go to buy your house, they're gonna sign the smart contract agreement, and then a infallible payment will be taken, whatever is agreed upon, whatever payment per month, or if it's just all up front, it's going to happen. And the non-fungible token for your house is going to move from your digital wallet through the blockchain into this other person's digital wallet, and they will now have ownership. And as you mentioned, that's like birth certificates, all that stuff is going to be it's all going to be non-fungible tokens, folks. All of it will be NFTs. And that's just one aspect of the fourth industrial revolution. That book gets into a great many. For example, work is going to look totally different. They said that there's in this book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, there's like you think like all the blue collar stuff is going to go by the wayside. That's all going to be anything that can be put into robotics will be put into robotics. That stuff probably longer than 2030. But in this book, they get into a section on like the things that you think are least likely to be automated, which is the example Klaus Schwab uses, if it's Klaus Schwab that writes it. I would assume it's actually ghostwritten, but I don't know for sure. The thing that we assume, for example, that would be least likely to be automated would be like narrative creation. And they actually showed they did a test where they had the editor of the New York Times read a novel written by a human and then read a novel written by an artificial intelligence, and asked him which one was written by which, and he couldn't tell. So all of these intellectual jobs are also going to be automated. So folks, the system that they're ushering in is for the robots. It's not. It's even less human than the one in which we currently find ourselves. And because all the mass depression and suicide and horrible things, we can tell we're already in a very inhuman system. So yeah, the fourth industrial revolution is very much going to happen, blockchains, the central bank digital currency rollout that is happening as we speak. Actually, they're destroying the United States intentionally. They're destroying the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar is close to losing its singular reserve currency status. I mean, there's going to be, I don't think it's going to go away completely, but it's going to be lessened, certainly. And in a sense, by the way, in a sense, it kind of should, because it very much benefits Americans versus everyone else. I mean, it sucks for Americans, but it's kind of unfair for other people. But having said that, if you all remember, the other World Economic Forum book I got behind me is COVID-19: The Great Reset, and most people haven't read the book, but they've heard the commercial or seen the commercial. And I advise people to go check out the commercial again now, or pause the video or after, or whatever. But it's because it has I think there's 8 different little statements it makes. And the first one everyone remembers, and that is, by 2030 you will own nothing and you will be happy. These things are happening. The BlackRock of the world are literally buying neighborhoods of houses in the United States, and charging and giving hundreds of thousands of dollars over asking price too. So people will say yes, because we're all going to be renters shortly. But if it's point number 7 or something, is that America will no longer be the world superpower. Now, how do they know that unless they're trying to do that, unless there's an active program which is designed to destroy the United States of America? And I think I just saw the other day that this one company wanted to open a microchip factory now in the United States, and they needed like tons of engineers, like 500 engineers, but there literally weren't enough American engineers to do it. So America's, as we've talked about, our education system is absolutely been scuttled. I can't imagine what the plague did to the minds of the children. On that subject too, there's one of the people I work with at MPHC does child psychology, and she had a patient who was 9 years old who killed herself because she was afraid that she was going to, So there are a lot of hyper impressionable young minds, which COVID-19 changed moving into is even worse. I mean, it's so awful, But yeah, the fourth industrial revolution has all these, bells and whistles, which we are being normalized to. Again, if you consume Netflix every night or something, your mind is totally being seeded and prepped for it, and not only just to accept it, but that's good enough, but not just to accept it, but to embrace it, to love it, to promote it. And I was actually really surprised too about the metaverse. There's I think the man's name is Dennis Bushnell, and he was the chief science officer for a little place called NASA. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. He was the chief science officer for NASA from 1967 to 2015 or something. All right, this guy knows stuff. And he gave a talk in, I think it was 2003, and it was all about warfare, advanced warfare techniques. Of course it is. There's psychopaths around everything, folks. Psychopaths. But one of the slides in there, he was talking about the ages of mankind, and it was, of course, started with the hunter-gatherer to the agrarian age, and then to the industrial revolution, which was a huge swing and a huge change in humanity. And then into the technical, forgive me, I forget the exact names he gave to the ages of mankind. And after the current one we were in, he said it would end at about 2020, and what would begin is the nano age. And he wasn't sure when the nano age would end, but the last age of mankind, he said, would be the virtual age. And so you get everyone. I mean, and again, we're close to that, right? If you carry your phone in your pocket all day long when you go around, so the machine is almost totally incorporated into your body. It's not under your skin yet, but it's getting closer. And if we all live in the VR headsets in this metaverse, which I think if they rolled it out and had a really good product, millions of people would go into it, because the real world is horrible. And people
Yep.
intrinsically know. I mean, I think I talked about in the culture industry that, like I understand the furry phenomena, you know, it's like you try to seek some level of individualism because you know that what you're being inculcated with from the time you're born is crap. And you want to say, like, who am I? I know this is garbage, but I want to be me. So, but I don't have the words, I don't have the lexicon, I don't have the tools to express who I am. So you know what? I'm going to be a dog. That's it. I'm checking out. I'm a doggy. Don't talk to me. So
Hmm.
I get that. I get that. But like a lot of the people that have that problem would be like, yes, I'm just going to go live in the virtual world, and just do all my work from there, which is what the metaverse has stated its goal is. You can literally be in the metaverse, and you have to like take your VR headset off to go get your DoorDash, but that's it. That's the state of humanity. And folks, if when we get to that stage, if we get to that stage, it's over. Then you can say that humanity has been almost totally neutralized. Because
Hmm.
all of these ideas we talk about, we'll talk about these concepts, will not see the light of day ever again. Only in what Charles Galton Darwin calls the wild men, the men who are outside of the system, who are outside of technique, who have their own minds. Only will they be truly human anymore, and everyone else will be just the stimulus response automaton, because we're all living in reaction to what's happening in our virtual worlds.
And how wild is it that we keep seeing so many news clippings, articles, stories, and stuff within the social media realm that is all gearing towards AI, what AI can do. It started off as like, hey, here's some AI generated drawings here, and then here's what AI might put together if we had a movie for Tolkien's Silmarillion. And then it's, hey, let's see what the AI does when it writes a book. What if it writes a movie script? What if it's live writing lines when we have to replace a line on a show and we don't have the writer there? We can just plug in what the scene is, and the AI will give us the most pertinent line for that moment here. Um, what happens when we have the AI version of the Bible?
Yeah, right.
What happens when we have a digital constructs version of our gospels? What happens when you have Christians in places where you already have a subversion of the truth? Like I'm gonna call out Bethel right now with the Passion Translation, a complete bastardization of the Word of God. What happens when you have ministers who are spoon feeding this nonsense to a congregation that won't crack their own good book, won't just open their own Bible up on their own? They're content to go to church on Sunday, get their clutch of 5 verses from the pulpit, get a few fast songs, one slow song. We all take communion, we go home. We're re-upped for the week. What happens to all those people? I mean, the onus is so much on ourselves to stay rooted in the Word,
Yeah,
do our own digging. Like even at the bottom of the info section for this video, I have the Berean challenge thrown down at the feet of my listeners and viewers, and it's born of Acts 17:11, describing the Jews that lived in Berea being more noble than those in Thessalonica, because though they received the Scripture with all eagerness, they searched it daily to see if what they were told was indeed so. Um, it begs the question: what happens when that becomes a reality? Because I have to imagine that AI is going to be a very, very prevalent thing within the fourth industrial revolution. And it kind of makes me also wonder, where are people's heads at when we have movies like The Matrix, which shows you exactly what happens when AI goes too far? We have Terminator. did,
right.
did nobody watch T2?
Yeah,
We have 2001: A Space Odyssey. We have Hal executes an entire flight crew save for Dave.
yeah.
Like, do have we not learned our lesson, at least through the fiction?
Mhm. Yeah, right. And then those are all very wonderful examples of movies people should watch to see it. And I like your discussion there, because this COVID happened. Gosh, I said it again. The reason we got where we are is because there are millions. I mean, millions and millions of Christians in name only, right? They actually live like modern pagans, right? They go to church on Sunday just to show up and have people think that they're living this godly life. Where then they go home and again they put the sports ball in the tube. They only pray if their like child is in danger or something, and then they
When they need something.
exactly, and then they just eat potato chips and get fat and lazy and go out, just go into oblivion. That's that is what's happening because of lukewarm people, and certainly lukewarm Christians. And obviously that has to change. Obviously that must change, you know. And this is why also why I kind of mentioned before the show why I do this is because you can't just go to people with the truth, real truth. You have to you have to break, and you have to use this stuff. You have to use this information so you can kind of touch people's hearts and say, hey, here's what you really need. Here's what you're really after. Here's what can really satisfy what your soul is yearning for. But you can't just bring them the gospels. You can't just bring them catechism. You can't just bring them these things that telling about the truth. You have to say, Charles Galton Darwin had this idea that he's going to intellectually sterilize people and just make them love materialism. So that might be part of your problem.
Yeah, right.
so it has to be unfortunately a more sophisticated um, way of approaching it, and a lot of it, what I do too, is for liberals. Honestly, I mean, it's for people who are totally clueless and desperate and actually at the point of like, please, like someone help me, and then they can say, hey, whoa, this, oh, psychopaths, run thing, that makes so much, actually makes way more sense than, oh, like the president on television's got my best interest at heart, because
Mhm.
maybe they don't. And then my television shows are all designed to, vitiate my virtue, oh, that makes a lot more sense. So that's a lot of, perhaps the main impetus of why I'm doing and have been doing open secrets, is to give people those answers, Um, so yeah, that was wonderful,
I
wonderful.
mean, it's powerful stuff. I just shared the podcast link again inside the comment section for those of you who haven't checked it out. Get on over there. Just pull up a tab, so you've got it bookmarked for later.
Yeah.
Sorry, bookmarked for later.
Thank you.
Um,
I'll say something too, like the reason I've been trying not to say, C19, I've been saying C19, I've been saying the jab, is the most recent episode of Open Secrets was actually taken off of that YouTube playlist and actually got Grand Forks bestsellers removed from YouTube for a week. And I think that's the second time that a show that I've been on has done that. So I apologize to the guys that are allowed, but it's like, oof, I'm sorry. But, and it's because of disinformation about jabs that it was removed. And I didn't even talk about jabs until like an hour and a half into the show. But there are other places you can find um, open secrets. I think they're on Podbean. Unfortunately,
yeah, they are.
it's not organized like as in a playlist like it is on YouTube. But it's on Podbean. It's on like Audible. It's on like basically anywhere you can get a podcast. I think you can find Grand Forks Best Source, and therefore you can find the Open Secrets material. But it was so sad because the um, the book I did, the Ghost in the Machine, is such a. It was one of my. It's actually one of my favorite books from this set of books I've done, because it's not just about these guys and their nasty ideas. Even though that's you learn a lot, you expand your mind a lot delving into that stuff. It actually gives you a lot of powerful philosophical tools which you can apply and
Mhm.
talk about that, because it's truly awesome stuff. And if and reading that stuff, I was actually reading that book for the first time when I was writing my dissertation, and I started to see like the bigger picture, because I just started to apply this principle, and it's called the principle of Holon, Holon, Holon. And I won't get into the nitty gritty of it right now, but it's a way to hierarchically understand and organize thought, because essentially everything in existence is a holon. And then when you have these structured thought around a single idea, a single holon, you can start merging them with other ones, and this becomes a mechanism for discovery. And if I say, if I were to teach at graduate school, this would be the very first thing I would teach them, because it's a intellectual mechanism that you can put into practice to make discoveries. And
Mhm.
stuff is not, it's actually also mechanisms to create comedy, and also mechanisms to create art, transcendence. So super powerful things. It just so happens that the book ends with Kessler, who is the absolute atheist, and the ghost in the machine is the soul, consciousness. And he says that we humans throughout history have always given their consciousness to these religious ideals, which end up in warfare and bloodshed. And especially he cites the examples of like the Aztecs who went on to, slaughter babies in service to their lord, which is the devil, of course. But he says that we have to blunt out this capacity within mankind. And he was talking about, this book came out in 1967, and he was referencing symposia he had attended in like 1961 on mind control and changing minds. So yes, okay, people, they have been talking about putting, and he even cites mRNA, right? We could put specific sequences of mRNA into people's minds, into their brains, to destroy parts of their brains, right?
Make them already biologically bent to be subservient.
Exactly. And what I say at the end that got this show banned, and I'll use different lingo, is that this idea was already well in vogue and actually en masse in practice by the middle 60s. And that was the mass jabbing of people for diphtheria and pertussis and whatever, all polio, all of those things. Because the evil genius of all jabs, all of them, is that they put the mercuries and the, no longer mercuries, but aluminum hydroxides. There are entire journals dedicated to how toxic aluminum is. And the evil genius of this is that wherever the bolus of aluminum hydroxides or whatever goes into your body, whatever tissues it's glomming onto, that's the symptoms that are going to result. And for example, if every injection of toxin always went to your brain, it would be obvious, because literally all our kids would be coming out autistic. But instead, they get a whole, panoply of new diseases that are sourced from this. And, we're allowed to study only what we obviously we'll have to get into the scientific system on some other show.
Mm-hmm.
But we're only allowed to study what they want us to be studying, right? Because this is something that's designed to change your immune system for the rest of your life, but it can't possibly do it in a negative way, right? Well, the explosion of autoimmunities is a result, not exclusively. I would say, I don't know. If I had to guess, I'd say, like 80+% of autoimmunities are due to the injections we receive on the first day of our life. And folks, if you're in, you have a newborn in your hospital and you refuse the Hep B shot, and then here's what you say. Just ask your doctor, because they're going to come in and try and educate you about this. Just ask them, what is hepatitis B, and see what they say. Because of what it is, it's an STD, right? You only get this thing, by having, profligate sexual relations, or you're sharing needles, right? And then you ask them, well, why does my 1-day-old need this? I mean, certainly if I had STD and I gave birth to this child, then you could test me. We would have already known this thing. I don't have hepatitis B. I don't have a problem with my liver. So obviously my child doesn't. So why on earth are you giving my 14-hour-old child a shot for this? It's actually nonsense. It's ludicrous. And the only solution, I can think of, is there is higher powers within the medical system that want that child sick, that want that child dead. They actually wish you had aborted that child. So it's a totally horrible thing. But Kessler's principles of injecting things to destroy brains was already well in vogue, because it's actually really, again, this isn't difficult science. There's not a lot of genius into the design of the everyday jab like there is into what the C19 jab. It's obvious, and it was obvious for a really long time, that aluminums and mercuries were poisonous, and they said, hey, let's shots and just roll them out.
If you look, that's why pregnant women shouldn't eat that much tuna, because of all the mercury that ends up in those fish.
Right, and even that one's not injected. That doesn't go right into your bloodstream, right? That has to go through your whole digestive tract first. And so, it's like if you look into the origin of injections, you find a man named Jonas Salk. Jonas Salk is one of the gods, if you will, of modern medicine. He's in the pantheon of the Salk Center over there because he invented the polio shot. And this guy wrote a book called The Survival of the Wisest. The Survival of the Wisest. It's actually I was considering doing it for Open Secrets, but it's pretty boring. It's not that juicy. There are some things he says, but what he is obviously a eugenicist, and he is obviously Malthusian.
Mm.
Malthusian means is of the belief that of Thomas Malthus, who said that there is an exponential growth to human population, while food production is
Yep.
only linear growth. Therefore, we're going to reach the carrying capacity of the world,
And
and so
then
we
just
got
taper off.
yeah. Well, we got to do something because that's really bad if we reach that. So we got to actively seek to keep the human population down. And so this guy, he wrote this book, Survival of the Wisest, where he talks about a new evolution that's happening, and it's an evolution of intellect, it's an evolution of wisdom, and those that are wise are the ones that will be able to pass their seed, will have actual fitness, and fitness being the ability to reproduce. They will have actual fitness, whereas those that are unwise are not worthy of reproducing and therefore must, you know, stop reproduction. Their lineage must be ended. And so that's what this guy polio shot can. First of all, it was a live virus injection, which can cause the disease it's trying to stop. But more importantly, it had simian virus 40, SV40, which is a highly potent carcinogen. And I forget the woman. There was a woman at the NIH at the time who discovered this, and she's like, "What are you doing? There's SV40 in this thing. We gotta stop this," you know. But she was obviously silenced, and they rolled out in mass these Salk injections, and there used to be on CDC's own website when they do biopsies of tumors, they found SV40 in millions of people, millions, folks. So this has been going on for a long time. We were born into the system that is designed to destroy us. Again, indeed, it does not want us to exist in the first place, and we must be aware. We must elevate our consciousness level and then do something to stop it. I'll just say one more thing here too. Is I'm not, I see like the Tucker Carlsons and I see the Russell Brands or whatever. What they're doing is they're talking us through the problem, right? Again, they're meant to just keep you in your couch. I'm not that dude. I mean, we need to get active. We need to go out and talk to people, right? Educate people, find our kindred, the people who are willing to do something about this, and we must do something about this. And I think it was Alan Watt that said that for us to have justice, everything in our world has to change. We are so in deep here. We are so beholden to this modern monolithic system. And with the fourth industrial revolution coming, it will only get worse. That we must change virtually everything in order for us to bring justice to these evildoers. And I feel very strongly that this is what I'm supposed to do, is to talk about these things. And then I have a very strong calling for, justice, because it's just such unbelievable evil that is being perpetrated on us. And that is, why I'm here with you today. So.
Well, and I got to thank you again for joining us tonight. One of the things that really struck me was, I guess it would have been your second to last show now, since we're still waiting for Ghost in the Machine. But towards the end of it, you sort of laid the charge out for people, and you very much like just now you said, why am I doing this? Why do I feel the need to provide this information for you? Is this just so we can sit back and just be essentially armchair patriots? And you said no. You said, I plan on taking real action to see that people that are carrying out these nefarious things are brought to justice. And you said something very, very powerful. You said, and I don't plan on surviving it.
Yeah.
And that is uncommon valor right there. And would that we all were so brave. And I think it was Ezekiel who said, hey, Lord, send me. If not someone else, send me. And that is the attitude that we have to adopt. The willingness, as Paul lays out for us in the epistles, points out that in this next life we will indeed serve and reign with Christ, provided that we also suffer with Christ. So I mean, there's a bit of a quid pro quo there, if you want to do some reigning. So consider this time here your training for reigning. I do have one final question. We'll sort of wrap it up the last 6 minutes that we got. But one thing that I find can happen to a person after ingesting this information here, especially on your podcasts, is that for those who are very easily deprived of their hope, there is a danger in somebody becoming just some cynical asshole
Mhm.
after sucking it all up, and having sort of this idea of why does it matter, we're already screwed. It's sort of like in Aliens, game over, man, that's it, game over. um so what would be your advice to somebody who says, okay, well, I've taken this all in, what now? Like, how do I mitigate the feelings that I'm undoubtedly going to be having, and what are my next steps?
So, you know, that's a great question. And I want to say that the system we're up against is powerful, right? It is the most dominant system the world has ever seen, period, point blank, And I'm at the point, this is going to sound like there's no hope, but there is. I'm at the point where I believe that it requires miracles. It requires it. And our Lord certainly is far more powerful than the system. All right. I mean, absolutely, without question. It is just a matter of people conforming their will to His, seeing these problems, and giving yourself to Him so that He can work through us. And it doesn't have to be, I think, a consciousness shift because people watching the show or whatever it is, and they go out and telling people, I think that is a miraculous thing. We did get enough people on board to see that and then come together and say we need to form a thing to stop this, some partnership to stop this, I think that would be miraculous. But you know, even if in this life we don't succeed, if we're doing good, if we're doing what the Lord wants us to do, there's certainly hope and that we'll have a wonderful next life. But what you'll find when you start doing, even if we lose, even if I am killed in this pursuit, which, I mean, if this continues, I expect that, but who knows? I don't know what's going to happen, but you will find that your life is happier. Your life is more meaningful. You wake up, you have purpose, right? It's such an important thing to have purpose in your day. And that's one thing, if you're working for the system, you wake up and it's just another day. You wake up, you eat your Pop Tarts and you drink your Tang and you go sit in your cubicle for 40 hours a week, and you come home and you watch the sports ball or whatever it is, and that's your just meaningless, robotic, automated existence. Learning about this stuff, learning about real, awesome, powerful knowledge that you can do things with is very uplifting, and it gives you purpose, it gives you drive, it gives you reason to wake up out of bed, jump out of bed, get up and get to work, and do good. And so there's purpose first and foremost in your own life, fulfilling what God wants for you. But second of all, there is purpose in that your brothers and sisters that live with your neighbors, the people who are supposed to be helping right across the street, they need to hear this stuff. And they need to hear it from people who are ready with articulate answers and are shining with virtue. And when you become that, you will become a light unto the world. It's destined, you will destined for that. So I guess that would be my answer to that question.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much, Daniel, for joining us tonight. Thank you, everybody who decided to tune in to the stream this evening. This has been one hell of a talk, and this has been a lot of truth revealed here. Again, and we recognize the unsettling nature about a lot of what we've talked about tonight. And though the truth is a hard pill to swallow it you must. And what you do with it now is left up to you. Once again, you can find Daniel's podcast over here on the Grand Forks Best Source YouTube channel. I'll click over here. I think I've got it. I can get it there. This is what the actual landing page looks like. You can find it under the playlist tab over here. Go sub to the channel. Go on over there, sub to the channel, save that podcast, get to listening, and get to doing your homework. Also, check out the Grand Forks Best Source website here. They also have a Facebook presence, which you'll find down in my description box below. Find all the links. I don't remember. Did you say whether or not the Ghost in the Machine is available off YouTube?
I think it's on every single platform except for YouTube.
Okay, cool. So hunt that one down, folks. I'm probably gonna find that out on Podbean and download that as soon as I'm done chatting with you here. And again, if I can, none of this here, folks, is meant to inspire you to terror. None of this here is meant to inspire you to board up your windows and doors and be a recluse for the rest of your days. While it is shocking, while it is a scary thing, we know that according to 2 Timothy 1:7, God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but one of what? Power, love, and a sound mind. Those three things altogether, there is no limit to the amount of ground you can take back for the kingdom. That which the enemy tried to steal, that which it has taken away, is meant for God. So to that end, every one of you have a awesome rest of your weekend. Have an even better week. God bless you and yours, and we will see you on the next one. Be well.